Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Table Talking with Ian Menifee. It's another bonus episode. The meantime, in between time, while we wait for episode 6, Independent Women to drop. So today, I wanted to hop on because everyone who knows me knows I love wrestling. Professional wrestling, that's my shit. Always has been. It's still real to me, even if kayfabe is dead. And one of my favorite all-time wrestlers retired yesterday. He had his final match yesterday. Um, there's two that are atop of my list. Always has been, ever since I first fell in love with professional wrestling. Um, we all know first is Bret the Hitman Hart, and second would be the Icon Sting. So for the longest time, they say, yeah, maybe Sting would be number one. I might have I started really jigging with him before I got hip to the Hitman. But Sting, man, shout out to the Icon Sting. Loyal to the T to WCW, the franchise. I mean, he stayed 10 toes down through everything, man. So today, I'm going to talk about my favorite Sting moments. Just talk about, Sting the wrestler. Um, if you don't know, my top 5 countdown, top 25 wrestlers I did. Of course, Bret Hart was number 1. Stone Cold Steve Austin was number 2. Undertaker was number 3. Sting was number 4. Macho Man Randy Savage, number 5. Because, when you're making these lists, you have to uh, straddle the fence of being subjective and objective with your thought process. But today, we've been a homer. Stinger, baby. So, what first comes to mind when I think of Sting is the beach blonde hair, the chiseled physique, the neon tights, the colorful face paint, the charisma, the jumping around, the yelling, the screaming. And I think that's what first drew me to Sting because I've always loved WCW, always loved NWA. Like, they're one and the same, essentially. Um, it was just something about that brand of um, professional wrestling. Uh, and then with Sting, it's like he overcame so much adversity. When he first bust on the scene in the late 80s, um, into NWA, he was with the UWF and all that good stuff. He bounced around a little bit, but when he first came to the NWA, I'm kind of like, who is this guy? He has a different look. It almost puts you in the frame of the Road Warriors, because at that time they were the only ones who were wearing the face paint, um, and had that big physique that we've grown accustomed to. And then one of my earliest memories of Sting is his legendary battles with the Great Muta. You know, the Pearl of the Orient, as Jim Ross would call him, over the NWA World Television Championship. And then Muta was also a part of the JTEX um, Corporation with Gary Hart and Terry Funk. Cause Funk was in the feud with the Nature Boy. We'll get into that later. But those 4 men did team up. I mean, well, Funk and Muta versus Flair and Sting. Most notably, they had I believe, a Thunder Cage tag team match. Check out the Thunder Cage if y'all not hip. But just Sting and Muta. And then speaking of Flair, not many people know that Sting had a very brief, and I do mean very brief, tenure with the Four Horsemen. So I believe that his affiliation with Flair and helping Flair against Muda and Funk, no, they extended him an invite into the infamous Four Horsemen. And Sting doesn't strike me as a yes man or a follower. So he ended up winning an opportunity to face the then world heavyweight champion, who was Ric Flair. And they didn't like that because the Horsemen had a win at all cost attitude to keep the championship within the reigns of the dreaded Four Horsemen. And Sting's unwillingness to relinquish his title shot, he was unceremoniously kicked out via beatdown. And that set the tone for the Flair and Sting feud. And we can reference Clash of the Champions 1 when Flair and Sting went battle to a 45-minute draw. Like, that is a hell of a match. To me, that's what put Sting on the map as a premier superstar. So if you are a WWE fan or AWA fan or whoever, at that time, you can't help but to be drawn to this guy. Like, who is he? Right? Like, who is this guy with the face paint, the neon colors? But for a man his size, he has so much agility. And in the ring, he knew his way around the ring like no other. Even though Sting was a glutton for punishment, as Bobby the Brain Heenan would call a human pinata. But, Sting indeed had legendary clashes against Ric Flair. What ultimately that was led to him winning the championship at the Great American Bash, I believe 1990, first championship, NWA World Heavyweight Championship. And then, the early 90s for Jim Crockett Promotions and their transition away from the NWA into WCW, with Ted Turner buying it a couple years later and all of that. But you got to think that Sting, he was indeed a franchise player. Because even when he wasn't world champion and he was U.S. champion, his feud with Ravishing Rick Rude and the Dangerous Alliance was main event worthy, which led to a culmination of what I feel is the greatest War Games match ever. Sting Squadron, and it was a star-studded match because he had Barry Windham, Dustin Rhodes, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and Nikita Koloff, who he was beefing with, right? Because let's flash back because the War Games took place at Wrestle War '92. So there was a tag team match at Super Brawl. I'm sorry, not 92, 91. The World Tag Team Champions, the Steiner Brothers, was defending the belts against Sting and then U.S. Champion Lex Luger. And Nikita Koloff came down. He slithered down to the ring to hit Luger with the chain because he had it wrapped around his arm because, his finishing move with the Russian sickle. And Sting pushed Luger out the way and took the brunt of the blow. And that kicked off the feud between Sting and Nikita Koloff. Because Koloff was trying to get at the U.S. champion because Koloff himself was a former United States champion. So Sting took the brunt of the blow for his buddy, and that led to a Sting feud with Nikita Koloff. And the foolery with that, sometime later, Sting ended up winning the U.S. championship. And he ended up losing it to Ravishing Rick Rude because Lex Luger betrayed him. And would set up the Lex Luger Sting World Title match at Super Brawl 2. Which was a great match within itself. So let's get back to the War Games. So then you had the Sting Squadron versus the Dangerous Alliance, who had like Hall of Famers Stunning Steve Austin, world television champion. United States heavyweight champion, Ravishing Rick Rude. Um, the Enforcer, Arn Anderson, and Beautiful Bobby Eaton, world tag team champions. Larry Zbyszko, Medusa, all led by Paul E. Dangerously, aka Paul Heyman. You don't get no better than that. So that War Games was, in my opinion, the most bloodiest, the most violent, the best War Games by far. And I'm not gonna spoil it so you guys can check it out. And then when Sting transitioned out of that feud with Rick Rude and members of the Dangerous Alliance, here comes this monstrosity, this behemoth, this war machine known as Big Van Vader, who has the former, at the time, 7 times world heavyweight champion Harley Race as his manager. And Vader was just steamrolling everyone. So Vader's first crack at the world title against Sting, like he beat him up pretty bad, broke his ribs, all that. Took the belt, pending, clean, with the power bomb, 1, 2, 3, right? And then I believe their next match after that would be another classic, the King of Cable tournament match, when Vader came out wearing a do-rag. But it was a hard-hitting, violent match by two hated rivals, and Sting ended up picking the dub. And then they had another match based upon what was the White Castle of Fear. And I believe this was that Super Brawl 3, a leather strap match between Sting and Big Van Vader. A violent, bloody match. We saw Big Van Vader, by the skin of his teeth, escape with the World Heavyweight title. But the Sting and Vader matches were very brutal, with Sting on the receiving end of a lot of punishment. But just to see him go in there and stand toe to toe and survive the onslaught of Big Van Vader, again, shows you what you want in your franchise player, your franchise champion, like the icon, you know? And then I think that even going from those feuds and then the whole debacle with WCW, NWA over the world title belts, and then the introduction of the international world heavyweight title, Sting was still a main player. Even though when Hogan entered the scene, he got sidelined a little bit. Well, a lot. Until he went through a whole transformation after the War Games of 1996. I believe it was, when you see the NWO defeat Team WCW thanks to an imposter Sting, who had everyone in WCW questioning Sting's loyalty. How the hell do you question the loyalty of the franchise? And then, fake Sting, along with NWO, beat up Lex Luger in a parking lot in the pouring rain. So, and that was the catalyst that finally drove him into the Sting character. I mean, the Crow character. From Bash at the Beach '96, that whole thing, even from the hostile takeover, and for 1 year, he didn't say a word, and people wonder where is his allegiance. To one fateful evening, he decided to make that known, and Starrcade '97 should have been so much more. Should have been so much bigger, had it not for been Hogan's politicking bullshit and his ego. Like, the buildup was there. Lose clean, and then everyone goes home happy. Everybody gets paid. The fans are happy, but no, we have to deal with Hogan and his politicking bullshit. And it took away from the hard work of everyone involved up to that point. And so up until WCW in the last days, even with the New Blood versus the Millionaires Club, Sting versus Vampiro, Sting didn't jump ship. And even when WWE purchased WCW in 2001, we didn't see Sting, maybe because of contract issues or whatever. But seeing Sting in TNA, more specifically when he feuded with Jeff Jarrett, the NWA belt, that was refreshing. It had a feel of nostalgia for me. And then when Sting turned, it was like he was a tweener between heel and face. When the formation of the main event Mafia, that included Scott Steiner, Booker T and Sharmell, Kevin Nash, Kurt Angle. Like that incarnation, I think was the first incarnation of the main event Mafia. Definitely a dope ass faction. And then just seeing Sting finally, excuse me, when he graced the WWE back in 2014, 15, it was bittersweet, and I felt like he was mishandled, you know, and it was kind of like, I don't know, I felt indifferent, but it was good to see him there making an impact, but he never got that signature win. Never got that signature win. So when Sting um, finally made his appearance at AEW, I was happy as shit. I'm like, yes, the icon Sting. And there's so many memorable matches. And I believe he retired from AEW undefeated as a tag team with this crazy son of a bitch named Darby Allin. But just to see the icon Sting doing some wild ass crazy spots, but just giving it all that he has, and you can't help but just rock out with him. And it kind of sucks that he's retiring, but I get it. Nothing lasts forever. But I mean, I just always, like I said, always loved Sting, man. Like I remember when the WCW Galoo figures dropped. I think my first figure I purchased with my own hard-earned money, because they were $2.99 plus tax. So if you do the math back then, that's $3.21. And I think the first one I purchased was Rick Steiner. And that's because they didn't have Sting. But rest assured, I found him. You know, and I just want everyone to know, just like Sting was dope, man. Like even all the Sting figures, just the face paint, the trench coats, the crow, the neon, the themed out face paints, just all of it. Like Sting was one dope ass character. Shout out to Steve Borden, cause that's his name. But Sting will always be remembered, always be loved, always be appreciated in my books as one of the true greats. If I am doing a fair list with a mix of subjective and objective, he's definitely in the top five. But if I'm not being fair and I'm just being a homer or a mark, he's top two, no debate. But I just want to hop on here, man, and just talk about the icon Sting a little bit. You know, show some love to his retirement. If you haven't already, check out my last short or video talking about independent women, as well as all my other videos and podcast episodes I dropped. FWO figure reviews. It's like I got so much going on. And I may do something special in commemoration of my guy Sting. Haven't settled on it yet, but trust me, I'm heavily leaning towards that. But I'm going to get on up out of here, y'all. Like, thank you so much for the love, peace, and blessings. All my wrestling fans, Sting fans in particular, I'm here for you. just keep the magic alive. So peace and blessings until next time. Ow! I just had to do it one good time.